We start here in Japan, where the government has decided to add 3 prefectures to its state of emergency as coronavirus cases continue to rise.
We will work closely with local governments in the areas under the state of emergency to implement strict antivirus measures with a strong sense of urgency. Those measures include suspending serving alcohol or offering karaoke at bars and restaurants, as well as promoting remote working.
Suga also promised that the government will speed up the vaccination rollout. The state of emergency is currently in place in 6 prefectures, including Tokyo and Osaka, until the end of this month. Starting Sunday, it will also cover Hokkaido, Okayama, and Hiroshima in an effort to curb infections and ease the strain on medical systems. The government will also designate 3 more prefectures as areas where intensive virus measures should be taken. The minister in charge of the coronavirus response says he's concerned about more infectious variants. He noted that younger generations are also at risk of developing serious symptoms. Researchers at Japan's National Institute of Infectious Diseases say that variants carrying the N501Y mutation now likely account for about 90% of new cases. Health authorities reported more than 6,200 new infections across Japan on Friday and 81 deaths. The International Paralympic Committee says it plans to cut the number of visiting overseas officials to the Tokyo Games by 60%. The change will affect senior officials from international sports organizations, but not those in charge of operating the competitions. The committee's president told NHK everything possible is being done to make the games safe for the athletes. Andrew Parsons said Japan will continue to take comprehensive safety measures. Meanwhile, an online petition calling for the cancellation of the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics has collected more than 350,000 signatures from Japan and overseas. The lawyer who organized the petition says the question is whether the priority should be on holding the games or protecting people's lives. He's submitted it to the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, the IPC, and the International Olympic Committee.
The Games need to be held in an environment where people all over the world welcome the event from the bottom of their hearts. That's not the current situation, and the Games should be cancelled.
The head of the Tokyo Organizing Committee says she understands the concerns and the committee is making efforts to address them.
If we can't protect the health of the people, we won't be able to gain their understanding for hosting the games. If we can ensure safety and security, it will be possible to hold the Tokyo Games.
Another online petition is calling for the games to be held with adequate measures in place against the virus. In a separate development, the minister in charge of the games says training camps for foreign athletes have been called off in 45 municipalities. In 32 of them, it was the participating team that decided to cancel due to infection concerns. A controversial draft revision to Japan's immigration law has sparked fierce debate among lawmakers. It would change rules on detaining foreign nationals facing deportation orders. The ruling coalition wanted a lower house committee meeting to vote on the bill on Friday, but the opposition bloc refused, criticizing parts of the bill. The proposed revision would allow authorities to deport people who've applied for refugee status 3 times, even if their applications are still being processed. Opposition parties want that provision removed. They're also calling for limits on the time people spend in detention. The opposition also say they won't vote on the bill until more details emerge around the death of a Sri Lankan woman in detention in March. She had overstayed her visa. The Justice Minister says she's told immigration officials to honor the wishes of the woman's relatives who are now in Japan partly to hold her funeral. Kamikawa Yoko says this includes asking whether they want to visit the detention facility.
I want an investigation team, which includes third-party members, to look into what kind of medical treatment was provided, including outside medical institutions, and come up with a thorough final report.
A group of about 500 academics and supporters of refugees are calling for the bill to be scrapped.
Those people cannot return to their countries for their own reasons. If we want to solve the situation, we should review our rules and discuss how to create a more appropriate immigration policy in our society.
Some foreigners seeking refugee status and their supporters visited the office of the UN Refugee Agency in Tokyo. They asked the staff to tell Japan's government about their worries over the bill.
I'm ethnic Rohingya from Myanmar. Everybody knows our situation there. If I'm deported to Myanmar, my life will be in danger.
Protesters also gathered near the Diet building, keeping their distance from each other amid the pandemic. Turning to the escalating violence between Israel and Palestinian militants. The military has massed troops along the border with the Gaza Strip, suggesting a ground invasion could be on the cards. Airstrikes and artillery fire have caused widespread destruction in Gaza, killing at least 119 people, including children. In response, the Islamic fundamentalist group Hamas, which effectively controls Gaza, has been launching rocket attacks into Israel. 7 people have died. The spiraling conflict has sparked concern around the world. In Tokyo, Israeli and Palestinian diplomats held separate news conferences on Friday.
We condemn today Israeli aggression and mourn for the death of innocent civilians. Over 500 civilian homes, has nothing to do with any kind of security, has been done by the Israelis.
The Palestinian diplomat said Palestine will continue to be a victim unless action is taken. He added that it's time to stop what he described as the Israeli military occupation. The deputy chief of the mission of Israel tried to justify his military's air attacks, saying his country has the right to protect its citizens.
We will not allow Hamas and other terrorist organizations to attack the civilian population of Israel without a response and a heavy price.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Meanwhile, about 300 Muslims and other people took to the streets of central Tokyo, demanding an immediate halt to the attacks on Gaza. Now to Myanmar, where a Japanese journalist who was detained in the country has been released and returned to Japan. Myanmar state-run media reported the move was made out of consideration of future ties between Myanmar and Japan. Kitazumi Yuki arrived at Narita Airport near Tokyo on Friday evening. He thanked people who worked for his release. He said he regrets he had to leave Myanmar as he wanted to keep reporting from the country.
I continue to tell the situation in Myanmar to the people in Japan and other countries.
Kitazumi had been based in Myanmar since 2014. He was arrested nearly a month ago after covering demonstrations against the military. He was indicted on charges of fueling anxiety among citizens and spreading false information. Meanwhile, a news organization in Myanmar says one of its journalists has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. The Democratic Voice of Burma, a broadcaster critical of the junta, said in a statement that its reporter Min Nyo was convicted on Wednesday. It says he was arrested and severely beaten by police while covering protests in the central town of Pi on March 3rd. DVB's editor-in-chief is demanding his immediate release, as well as all detained and convicted journalists in the country. DVB is also calling for the support of the international community. DVB's media license was revoked in March along with several other news outlets. Earlier this month, 3 of its journalists were arrested in Thailand for entering the country illegally. It's urging the Thai authorities not to deport them to Myanmar as their lives would be in danger. The junta is continuing its oppression of media. According to Reporting ASEAN, a journalist group which monitors the media situation in Myanmar, 80 journalists have been detained since the February 1st coup, and 45 are still being held. It's time now for a check on world weather. A drought emergency has been declared for many places of California as hot and dry weather continues. For more on that, we turn to our meteorologist, Sayaka Mori.
It looks like hot and dry weather in California will continue. Death Valley saw a high of 43.9 degrees on Thursday. The whole of California is under drought now, and 94% of the state is under severe to extreme drought. And again, hot weather and dry conditions will likely continue for a while, so significant improvement is not likely. Phoenix could see 38 degrees. Some fires are occurring in Arizona. Rainy weather once again across the south. Houston at 27 with rainy weather. Oklahoma City as well as Denver could see rainy weather on Saturday. We're watching a big disturbance over the Arabian Sea. This system could intensify to a cyclone. It could reach a very severe cyclonic storm, which is the second highest category on the cyclone scale, by Sunday, and then it could make landfall in Pakistan or western India next week. It's very rare to see a storm hitting Pakistan, so very careful. A very dangerous storm system is expected to pound these regions next week. Meanwhile, clouds are developing over western Japan, and rain will also spread towards the east, affecting many places of western Japan on Saturday. So rainy weather once again will hit Kagoshima into next week, and Tokyo will remain dry at least for the next couple of days, and gloomy conditions will continue into next week. Before we go, I want to show you some cute video coming out of northern Japan. As the weather warms up across Japan, it's also the season of new birth for the Japanese macaques, also known as snow monkeys. These are the northernmost living non-human primates, and they are located on the Shimokita Peninsula in Aomori Prefecture. About 50 of these monkeys live at the Wakinosawa Wild Monkey Park in Mutsu, and so far, 4 babies have been born since last month. More are expected to be born through June. That's it from me. Have a nice weekend.
Hamas militants fired more missiles at Israel Friday. Israel answered with new airstrikes. Israel reportedly is gathering troops on its border with Gaza. An official with the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention says it is actively seeking approval from the World Health Organization for a series of Chinese-made vaccines. In Myanmar, quickly formed protests against the military government make a brief return to Yangon. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a policeman in Kinshasa is killed and many are injured as opposing Muslim groups clash.
Palestinians in northern Gaza are fleeing from Israel's heaviest bombardment to date. At least 119 Palestinians are reported killed in Gaza since Monday. 9 people have died in Israel. Meanwhile, there's been more violence between Jewish and Israeli Arab groups fighting within Israel. The government has ordered a massive reinforcement of security forces to suppress the unrest. Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives have elected Elise Stefanik to serve in their number 3 leadership position, replacing Liz Cheney. In contrast to Ms. Cheney, Ms. Stefanik has backed Donald Trump's lie that the presidential election was stolen. And Prince Harry has said he wants to break the cycle of the pain and suffering of his upbringing as he raises his own children. He said, though, he didn't think we should be pointing the finger at anybody.